Shalom and welcome back to the Messiah Yeshua. I'm glad you're here to learn the Word of God with us. Today we're diving into this week's portion, which is called Vaetchanan. We'll explore its wisdom, its beauty, and we'll see how it speaks to our lives right now. Together we'll look at passages from Deuteronomy 3:23 through 7:11, as well as Isaiah 41 through 26, and it will also connect us to Luke 3:2 through 15. And as usual, we will start with the Torah portion summary. Moses petitions the Lord to allow him to enter the promised land, but God refuses to hear his prayer. Moses tells Israel that when they live out the Torah, the world will see God. Outside observers will be able to look to the Jewish people and discern truth about the nature and character of God. By keeping the commandments of the Torah, the Jewish people are a testimony to all nations. Moses argues against idolatry by reminding the children of Israel of their collective experience at Mount Sinai. They saw fire and heard a voice, but saw no form. Neither should they attempt to make an idol in the form of God. Moses reiterates the commandments of the Torah, reminding Israel of their covenant obligations. He repeats the 10 Commandments. Deuteronomy 6:4 begins the Shema. Moses tells Israel to heed his voice, remembering that the Lord is one, and to love the Lord with all heart, soul, and might. The Hebrew word for heed is Shema. The Shema continues with the commandments to love God. Moses tells the children of Israel that the words and the commandments of the Torah are to be upon your hearts. The commandments to teach them the commandments diligently to your sons is the basis for the commandment to study Torah. A person is to speak words of Torah when you lie down and when you rise up. The commandments of God are to be bound as a covenant sign upon the hand and on the forehead, which is the tefillin, and they are to be written on the doorposts, which is the mezuzah of the Jewish houses. When the children of Israel enter the land, they are not to make covenants with the Canaanite inhabitants. Instead, they are to uproot their idolatrous system of worship and desecrate their shrines. God is faithful to those who keep his covenant. And what exactly is Vaetchanan? The 45th reading from the Torah and the second reading from the book of Deuteronomy is named Vaetchanan, which means, "and I besought." The title comes from the first verse of the reading, which also says, "I also pleaded Vaetchanan with the Lord at that time." And that's in Deuteronomy 3:23. The portion completes the historical prologue of the Deuteronomy covenant document and begins a rehearsal of the stipulations. Part of that rehearsal is a repetition of the 10 Commandments and the famous first passage of the Shema. Answer to prayer. We will start with, "I also pleaded with the Lord at that time," Deuteronomy 3:23. We don't always get what we ask for. Moses wanted to enter the promised land. More than anything, he wanted to finish the journey, cross the Jordan, and stand on the soil of the Holy Land. He pleaded with the Lord, "Let me, I pray, cross over and see the fair land that is beyond the Jordan," Deuteronomy 3:25. Ordinarily, Moses got what he asked for. Whether he asked for miraculous provision, amazing signs and wonders, direct answers from heaven, or divine assistance and rescue, God heard the prayers of Moses and answered them immediately. But not even Moses got everything he wanted. Despite his earnest entreaties, God refused to allow Moses to enter Canaan. The Lord replied to his prayer, saying, "Enough! Speak to me no more of this matter." Deuteronomy 3:26. The Lord is gracious and compassionate. He delights to answer the prayers of his children. He opens his hand and satisfies the desire of every living thing. If an earthly father gives good gifts to his children when they ask him, how much more so does our Heavenly Father delight to answer our prayers? Yeshua teaches us, "Whatever you ask of the Father in my name, he may give to you." John 15:16. Nevertheless, the answer to the prayer is sometimes no. If God gave me everything I asked for in prayer, it would be the same as giving me the power of being God. I might arbitrarily change the color of the sky, reorganize the chemical composition of water, turn time backward, or wish the universe out of existence. Obviously, God has to reverse the right to say no to our prayers. And James, the brother of the Master, says, "You ask and do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, so that you may spend it on your pleasures." James 4:3. Even when we ask with the right motives, God still might have to say no. When we pray, we need to trust in God's wisdom and kindness, knowing that He has our best interest in mind. Though we don't always get an affirmative answer, we can be confident that our prayers are heard. Covenant stipulations. Now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the judgments which I am teaching you to perform, so that you may live and go in and take possession of the land which the Lord the God of your fathers is giving you. That's in Deuteronomy 4:1. In the previous study, we learned that the book of Deuteronomy is organized as an ancient Near Eastern covenant treaty document. Deuteronomy 1:1 through 5 functioned as a preamble. The contents of Deuteronomy 1:6 to 329 can be understood as a historical prologue to the document. And in Deuteronomy 4, the terms and conditions of the covenant stipulations begin. The covenant stipulations move from general to specific, beginning with the rehearsal of the Ten Commandments and moving into more detailed material as the book progresses. And we will talk about Torah and evangelism. It says, "So keep and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of peoples who will hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is wise and understanding people." Deuteronomy 4:6. The Jewish people are supposed to be different from other people. Through the commandments of the Torah, God asked the Jewish people to eat differently, dress differently, worship differently, and behave differently than the rest of the world. Through the commandments, God holds His people to high levels of integrity, justice, and ethical concern for others. The Torah-observant Jew cannot help but stick out from the people around him. The principle applies universally. When we live by God's righteous commandments, unbelievers will see the difference in our lives. The simple wisdom of a godly life is attractive to the outside world. Even secular people who do not believe in God will be drawn to the people of faith who live out their convictions. At the time God gave the Torah to Israel, the people of Israel were only a small tribal confederation, an inconsequential island of monotheism in a great ocean of paganism and polytheism. God told them that if they kept the Torah, the other nations would be drawn near. It worked. Today, the name of the God of Israel is known throughout the entire world. People from every nation have been drawn to the light of Israel. So whether you're Jewish or not, a biblically based lifestyle can be a powerful tool for evangelism. When your boss asks you why you want Saturdays off, when your neighbors ask you why you won't eat pork chops, when your enemy asks you why you show him kindness instead of antipathy, when a stranger is bewildered by your open-handed hospitality, in all these and numerous other situations, you have the opportunity to share your convictions and the great hope of faith that is within you. A God so near. What great nation is there that has a God so near to it as is the Lord our God, whether we call on Him? Deuteronomy 4:7. The Lord says that when the pagan nations see the people of Israel observing His commandments, they will be drawn to the wisdom and understanding of Torah life. Moreover, they begin to learn about the Israelite religion. They will discover that unlike the pagan gods, the Lord is real, living God who is near to His people and answers their prayers. Now, a friend of ours used to know a fellow who was always telling him how easy it is to bring people to the Lord. It seemed that every week he had another story of how he had brought someone to place faith in God and confess the name of Yeshua for salvation. And our friend asked him, "How do you do it? How do you bring so many people to the gospel?" "It's easy," he said. "First, I ask them questions and I get to know them. I find out what they need and how I can help them. I show them genuine love. They see that I live my life strictly according to the Bible. So when they see that I really care about them, they ask me for advice for certain problems. I show them what the Bible says about their situations. I talk to them about prayer, teach them to pray, and teach them about how they need to have a relationship with God. It's easy. People naturally desire relationship with God. We can offer them the closest of relationships, the privilege of being sons and daughters of the Most High. He who seeks finds. From there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him if you search for him with all your heart and all your soul. Deuteronomy 4:29. Moses warned the children of Israel that if they strayed from the Torah and worshipped idols, God would exile them from the land of Israel and scatter them among the nations. Nevertheless, he would not abandon them. Moses says that if a person only needs to repent and seek the Lord, you will find him if you search for him with all your heart and all your soul. Similarly, if you guys remember, Yeshua teaches, he who seeks finds, and that's in Luke 11:10. So if we earnestly seek God and reach out for him, he will not hide himself from us. We should never congratulate ourselves as if we have already attained the goal. A person should always regard himself as a seeker of God. Seek the Lord and his strength, seek his face continually. That's in Psalm 105:4. And the prophet Amos tells us, seek the Lord that you may live. Amos 5:6. Even if we have found the way to God through the person of his Son, Yeshua, this is the only beginning of the quest, not the end. The real life of faith is an ongoing pursuit of the Lord. The contrite heart continues to seek God each day and continually cries out, I shall seek you earnestly. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh yearns for you in a dry and weary land where there is no water. As the deer pants for the water brooks, so my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? And that's from Psalm 63:1 as well as 42:1-2. According to the prophet Isaiah, seeking God does not refer to a mystical or philosophical quest for truth. Rather, it is the pursuit of righteousness. Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness, who seek the Lord. Isaiah 51:1. The prophet says, in another passage, he clearly states that seeking the Lord entails repentance. It says, seek the Lord while he may be found, call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and unrighteous man his thoughts. And let him return to the Lord, and he will have compassion on him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. That's Isaiah 55:6-7. The one who seeks finds, but what if a person does not seek? It is possible to go through life in a state of numb self-contentment, continually distracted by the things of the world. They do not look to the Holy One of Israel, nor seek the Lord. Isaiah 31:1. One can see children brought up in religious families who seem to nurture a bored disinterest toward God and the things of the kingdom of heaven. Their faith is inherited faith that has never taken root. They have no desire to seek God for themselves, and they quickly fall away from faith. There are also the lost in the world who do not have enough knowledge of God to seek him. As disciples, we need to encourage everyone to seek the Lord. A compassionate God. The Lord your God is a compassionate God. He will not fail you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant with your fathers which he swore to them. That's in Deuteronomy 4:31. Moses assured Israel that even if they did stray from God and fall under judgment and punishment, God would remain faithful to them. He explained that God is compassionate and committed to the covenant he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Even if all else failed, the children of Israel would be able to rely on God's mercy and his covenant faithfulness. This is good news for all disciples of Yeshua. Believers are brought near to God's covenants of promise through relationship with Yeshua. Not only the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but also the amazing promises of the new covenant. When we sin, fail, and prove ourselves to be unfaithful, we can rely on God to be compassionate and faithful. He does not abandon His children. He remembers His covenants and shows mercy and compassion. Some believers struggle all their lives with an unhealthy fear of God. They imagine God as a sort of cosmic policeman waiting for an opportunity to catch them in a sin and punish them. It is healthy to fear God, but it's not healthy to forget His compassion and faithfulness. God is not a policeman. He is our loving Father in heaven. All souls at Sinai. The Lord did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, with all those of us alive here today. Deuteronomy 5:3. As Moses related the covenant stipulations to the children of Israel, he reminded them of the revelation on Mount Sinai. He told them that God did not make the covenant with their fathers, but with them. This seems like a mistake. God did make the covenant with their fathers. He made the covenant with the generation that had come out of Egypt and died in the wilderness. Moses was addressing the children of that generation, not the people who originally stood at Mount Sinai and said, "All the words which the Lord has spoken, we will do." Exodus 24:3. In another passage, Moses told them, "Remember the day you stood before the Lord your God at Sinai." Deuteronomy 4:10. Yet that event had happened 40 years prior. Most of the people Moses was addressing had not stood at Mount Sinai, and those who had been at Sinai were only children at the time. Based on these and similar passages, Judaism teaches that every Jewish soul was at Mount Sinai at the time God gave the Torah. The mystics say that every Jewish soul was at Mount Sinai and accepted the covenant of keeping the Torah. By that we mean even the people that were not born yet. Their souls were already present there. This esoteric interpretation may seem a bit far-fetched, but the concept is similar to that idea expressed in the traditional Passover Seder Haggadah, that in every generation a person is supposed to regard himself as if he personally had been a slave in Egypt and redeemed by God. It is not important whether it is literally true that all souls were at Mount Sinai when the Torah was given. The point of the teaching is that every Jewish person is supposed to regard himself as if he had been present at Mount Sinai and personally accepted the covenant of keeping the Torah. This seems to be what Moses meant when he said, "The Lord did not make this covenant with our fathers only, but also with us, with all those of us alive here today." Deuteronomy 5:3. In a similar way, every disciple should regard himself as if he had personally reclined at the Last Seder with Yeshua, as if he personally had seen the empty tomb and resurrected Savior, and as if he personally had been with the disciples in Jerusalem when the Holy Spirit was poured out upon them. 10 Commandments again. The Lord spoke to your face to face at the mountain from the midst of the fire, Deuteronomy 5:4. As he lists the covenant stipulation, Moses repeats the 10 Commandments. Though the souls of the children of Israel might have been present in Mount Sinai on the day when God gave the 10 Commandments, Moses felt it prudent to reiterate those commandments for the new generation as a part of the covenant ritual. He said, "God declared to you his covenant which he commanded you to perform, that is the 10 Commandments, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone." Deuteronomy 4:13. We have already discussed the first 4 of the 10 Commandments in the comments, as you guys remember, in Exodus 20. Now we will briefly consider the remaining 6. And there is a chart of the 10 Commandments that appear in Exodus and Deuteronomy. So we'll go through them again. "I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods. Do not take the name in vain. Remember the Sabbath. Honor your father and mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. And you shall not covet." As we discussed the 4 in previous teachings, we will go ahead and talk about our mother and father. Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, that your days may be prolonged and that it may go well with you in the land which the Lord your God gives you. Deuteronomy 5:16. The Torah tells us to honor our parents. The word for honor is the Hebrew word which is kabed, essentially the same word we translate as glorify. The verbal root speaks of heaviness. To honor parents is to ascribe appropriate weight to them, to value them correctly, and to treat them with respect, dignity, and care that they deserve. Jewish tradition teaches that at very least, this means making sure that our parents are provided for in their old age. The spirit of the law, however, asks us to treat our parents with a profound respect. So honoring parents is the only one of the 10 commandments to come with a promise. The Torah tells us to honor our parents that your days may be prolonged and that it may go well with you on the land which the Lord your God gives you. Deuteronomy 5:16. Honor of parents is a concept that is largely lost in today's Western culture. To understand the Torah's perspective on honoring parents, it is useful to look at the honor accorded to parents in Eastern cultures. And there's a story of our friend. Once, while his parents and him were in Jerusalem with his older brother, they were approached by an Arab vendor who wanted them to consider buying some ancient oil lamps that he claimed to have found. He held out his hand to show them the little clay lamps. "Genuine antique," he said. And my friend's father was skeptical. He asked sarcastically, "Genuine antique made last week?" This was the wrong thing to say. The man became outraged and shouted at his bewildered father. His older brother stepped between them and asked the Arab dealer, "Do you realize that this man is my father?" The man was awash with embarrassment and contrition. He apologized again and again to our friend's father and his brother, and he kept saying, "I did not know that this is your father." Honoring one's parents means rising to their defense. Proverbs 17:6 says, "The glory of sons is their fathers." If we allow others to speak derisively of our parents, we are insulting and shaming ourselves. So we should nurture a fierce family pride that does not allow others to criticize our family members, especially our parents. And it says this in Proverbs 15:20. "A wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish man despises his mother." The commandment to honor one's father and mother is especially difficult for the generations of today's world. In the modern world, youth countercultures have learned to find their own identity by defining themselves in antithesis to the previous generation. The result is that a whole generation of human beings are raised to believe that disrespect for parents and disdain for their expectations is a normal and healthy path to individuality and adulthood. It is not uncommon to hear young people today speak back to their parents, argue with them publicly, or reply to them with sarcasm or open expressions. This is regarded as acceptable in today's culture. For believers, it is not acceptable. Our young people need to realize that even contradicting their parents is taboo. Public impertinence toward parents is a grievous sin. When we hear young people talk back to their parents, we should get embarrassed for their parents, embarrassed for the young people, and embarrassed to be present. It is shameful. Yet our culture has convinced young people that it is self-aggrandizing to speak back to a parent. Popular culture portrays it as natural for children and teens to appear autonomous and on a peer level with their parents. Secular teens hate being seen in public with their parents, and accepting parental authority hampers the perception of their independence. The Bible would call that sense of teenage autonomy pride and haughtiness. It demonstrates disrespect. Being cool is a big problem. Adults need to take the commandment of honoring parents seriously. The commandment does not expire when you turn 18. Someone will object. My parents are not worthy of honor. They did horrible things to me. Sometimes abuse and family dysfunction makes honoring one's parents unthinkable. Parents make a lot of mistakes. It is possible to emerge from childhood and realize that one's parents are not only fallible, but foolish or even irrational. The Torah does not tell us to honor our parents only if we find them worthy of honor. We are still to accord them appropriate honor. It is not our job to decide whether a parent deserves honor. Honoring parents can be done in small ways and large ways, such as staying in regular contact, looking after their needs, and deferring to their preferences and wishes when possible. Refusing to contradict or correct them is also a way of according honor. In order to properly honor one's parents, it may be necessary to bend one's religious convictions to avoid offending. Honoring one's parents is not something that comes naturally. Like all virtues, it is something that is learned. It is a discipline to be mastered. Parents also have a responsibility around this commandment. They need to be careful not to raise disrespectful children who will find it difficult to keep the commandment of honoring them. When we allow our children to treat us with impertinence or to regard us as peers, we are fostering disrespectful spirits. A parent should not grant any allowance for disrespect. However, a father cannot teach his child to honor him by demanding honor. Neither can a mother teach her child to honor her by demanding to be honored. Instead, we teach our children to honor us by honoring our own parents and by honoring our spouses. When a child observes his mother being honored, When a child observes his mother honor his father and vice versa, the child learns the art of honoring father and mother. Only the mother can properly teach a child to honor the father. Only the father can properly teach a child to honor the mother. Very interesting concept. A parent must never take sides with a child against the other parent. Also a very important lesson. If you feel that your spouse is wrong, take your spouse's side anyway. Do not contradict your spouse in front of the children. Disagreements with a spouse should never be spoken in the hearing of the children. When your child treats your spouse with disrespect, it is your job to rebuke the child on behalf of your spouse. Do not speak to your father that way. Never speak to your mother like that. Single parents need to establish firm and consistent boundaries with their children and turn to the community of faith for assistance when needed. Now we will talk about commandment number 6, murder. You shall not murder, Deuteronomy 5:17. The Hebrew language has a different word for murder than for killing. The word murder is ratzach. Does not refer to killing as in warfare or punishments meted about by a court of law or to accidental manslaughter. The Torah does not regard it as sin to kill another human being as a means of self-defense, as a soldier in battle, or as an agent of court that has issued the death penalty. Murder is the malicious, intentional killing of another person outside of the legal context. God does not tolerate murder. In a case of a murder that has been verified by at least 2 eyewitnesses, the Torah explicitly and repeatedly insists that the murderer be put to death by the court. No ransom is allowed. Murder is a grievous sin. Yet there are types of spiritual murder that believers routinely perpetrate. Yeshua teaches us that even hating a person in one's heart or publicly shaming or insulting a person is a form of murder. We will actually speak about publicly shaming in a little bit. Very important. So do not hate any human beings, but some of you are to rebuke, and some you are to pray for, yet some you are to love even more than your own life. And that's a quotation from Didach 2:7. Speaking ill of a person behind his or her back, which is Lashon Hara, character assassination, is also a type of murder. Spiritual types of murder cannot be judged by a Torah court on earth, but they will be judged by the ultimate Torah court, the court of heaven. That is why Yeshua advises us to seek reconciliation with our brothers before we enter God's presence. He also did say that we will be judged for every idle word that comes out of our mouth. Therefore, if you are presenting your offering at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother and then come and present your offering. Make friends quickly with your opponent at law while you are with him on the way, so that your opponent may not hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Truly I say to you, you will not come out of there until you have paid up the last cent. Matthew 5:23-26. And in regards to embarrassing a person. So if we think about it, the physical murder is, let's say, when a person gets killed and you see his blood rush out. Blood is life, so you basically murdered him. But there's also a big concept of shaming person in public. That is also counts as murder. Because when we embarrass the person in public, many of the people, if you guys realize, their face turns red. And what is that? It's been explained that the face turning red is basically your blood coming out of your skin in a way. Like the blood goes so deep into your cheeks that it becomes red. And by that, it actually alludes to the person committing murder in a different way. So basically, you embarrass somebody, you turn red, it's almost as if the blood gushed out of him and you have committed murder. So it's very important not to embarrass people in public. And that same, there's also a big lesson on how to treat your children in the same aspect as well. You never rebuke a child in public. It has always have to be done in person, where the child will not be embarrassed, and that you can solve the problem accordingly. So we have a big commandment to rebuke people if we see that they're doing something wrong. But it becomes a big sin if our rebuke leads to rebellion. So we always have to remember to do it in the right way, with dignity, with respect, with a lot of care. And there's an interesting story about a famous rabbi that once he seen his wife do something wrong on Shabbat. And what she did was something by accident that she wasn't supposed to do. And he never rebuked her right away. He looked at it and just closed his eyes. He didn't, take out a book and says, look, what you have done. In the book it says we can't do this, or we're not supposed to be doing that, and so on. He just let it go. And it comes that every few days, he teaches his wife some spiritual teachings, some Torah, some oral Torah. And there was a time where their learning had to come in place. And he made this teaching to be specifically on the subject of what he seen her do without telling her that. So he would show her, he would give an example of a person doing that and what it shows in the book and so on. And she understood. Well, actually, she realized that, hey, a few days ago, I've done something like that. And she made sure not to do it again. But he never even told her that he's seen her do it. And that is a perfect example of how we should be rebuking others or teaching others about something that they have done that is wrong. It always have to be indirectly. So tell a story or talk about something that a person, give a little bit of hints here and there. but never directly rebuke a person, because that can lead to a very bad sin. We'll talk about commandment number 7, which is adultery. You shall not commit adultery, Deuteronomy 5:18. In the biblical sense, adultery refers to the sin of a man having sexual relations with a married woman. In the days when Sanhedrin existed, the punishment for adultery was death for both the adulterer and the adulteress. If there is a man who commits adultery with another man's wife, one who commits adultery with his friend's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. Leviticus 20:10. Some Bible teachers teach that the death penalty for adultery has been overturned by Yeshua. Not true. Many New Testament readers have misunderstood the story of Yeshua and the adulteress in John 8. In that story, Yeshua was able to acquit the woman accused of adultery because there were not 2 corroborating witnesses willing to testify against her. Since the death penalty can no longer be carried out against adulterers, traditional Judaism requires a husband to divorce his wife if she is guilty of adultery. She is forbidden to marry the person with whom she committed the sin. This prescription of adultery is reasonable, but the story of Gomer and Hosea suggests that in some cases, marital reconciliation and healing might be tolerated even after adultery. The prophet Hosea married a woman named Gomer, but Gomer was unfaithful to him. She engaged in adulterous relationships with more than one person. The Lord told Hosea to divorce her, which he did. After some time, the Lord told Hosea to take her back and remarry her, and he did so. In the Torah, if a man cheats on his wife, it does not constitute legal adultery unless he has relations with another man's wife. Nevertheless, it is infidelity, fornication, and breach of the sacred marital covenant. Since polygamy is no longer practiced in Judaism and is forbidden among the disciples of Yeshua, a man is constrained to the same rigorous standard of monogamous fidelity to his spouse that a woman must have for her husband. Adultery is a terrible sin, but there are types of spiritual adultery that we routinely perpetrate. Yeshua teaches that even looking at another man's wife with lustful desires is adultery of the heart. Adultery of the heart cannot be tried in the Torah court of law on earth, but it can be judged and punished by the ultimate Torah court in the court of heaven. That is why Yeshua advises that it would be better to pluck out one's eye than to look at another man's wife with lust and be punished in hell. It says in Matthew 5:29, "If your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you. For it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell." We'll talk about number 8, stealing. You shall not steal, Deuteronomy 5:19. Taking something that belongs to someone else is wrong. The prohibition against theft is a basic requirement for human society. The Torah recommends punishing thieves by making them repay the amount stolen several times over. The Torah mandates that a thief must pay double to his neighbor for the value of what he has stolen. In a case of a livestock, if he cannot return the original animals, he must pay for 4 or 5 times the value to the owner. The Torah math works out to ensure that the crime does not pay. The Apostle Paul says, "He who steals must steal no longer, but rather he must labor, performing with his own hands what is good, so that he will have something to share with one who has need." That's in Ephesians 4:28. Theft can subtle form. theft can take subtle forms. You who preach that one shall not steal, do you steal? Romans 2:21. The Apostle Paul asks, a godly person would hardly walk into his friend's home and steal something from him. But there are other ways we steal from one another. Has it ever occurred to you that you might be stealing another person's time? Calling someone on the phone and then holding them in a long conversation might be robbing a person of precious time. Though I might be in no particular hurry, I should not assume that the person on the other end of the line has nothing better to be doing with his time than talking on the phone with me. Also, a person can steal another person's peace by arguing with them and being angry and making them upset for the day. A godly person needs to be carefully safeguard against even small forms of inadvertent theft, such as walking away with someone's ballpoint pen or failing to return a borrowed item. Which brings us to a very interesting teaching in the Gemara. So basically, the Gemara tells us that majority of people will be judged for stealing. And many of you might say, well, I don't remember stealing, or I have never stole. But it's a very important lesson to know that God sees stealing in a very different way than we do. For example, you can go to a grocery market and taste something, the food that you're buying, without asking. In God's eyes, that would be stealing. You can go to a bank and borrow a pen without asking, or just take the pen that they have there and never return it. That's more of a stealing, but even borrowing without asking is also stealing. Going to Tim Hortons and charging your phone without asking for permission also is stealing. So God sees stealing in a very different way, and we need to be very mindful of that. Another great example of it would be going to work, being late for 5 minutes, but still getting paid your salary or the hourly rate, even though you didn't work for those 5 or 10 minutes. That's also stealing in a way. And the Gemara says that another judgment will be made on minority of people, which is for idol worship, which includes the prohibited sexual relationships with people, which, thank God, is only the minority. The Gemara also teaches that all the people will be judged for lashon hara, which is evil speech. That's something that every person is guilty of. Speaking bad about some person, spreading rumors or gossip or giving a bad opinion. Most of the people are guilty of it. And the remaining people that will say, well, I've never done that, or I'm not guilty of that. The Gemara brings a specific example of lashon hara that says everybody is guilty of, even the people who think they're not guilty of it. And the example is when somebody asks you of an opinion of a person, and you show a certain expression of the face or an act that the person already knows what opinion you have of that person, which is not a good one. That is also considered evil speech, because you basically degraded a person by your actions or by the look of your face without even saying anything. And the Gemara says every one of us is guilty of that. So hopefully that was some interesting information for you to know to be better, focus on striving and doing things correctly in life. I will talk about commandment number 9, liar, liar, pants on fire. You should not bear false witness against your neighbor, Deuteronomy 5:20. Lying is a sin. We all know that. But contrary to the popular opinion, the 9th commandment is not a prohibition against lying. In fact, there are times when lying is not a sin. For example, during World War II, many Christians found it necessary to lie to the Nazis to keep them from discovering Jewish people hidden in their homes. The ninth commandment is a prohibition against perjury. In the Torah court of law, every matter must be established on the authority of at least 2 eyewitnesses. A legal system based on eyewitnesses' testimony is only as reliable as the integrity of those witnesses. So in Torah, court of law such as the Sanhedrin lives hung in a balance based on a witness's testimony. The punishment for false testimony is that the false witness should receive the punishment that would have been due the plaintiff if convicted. It says, "The judges shall investigate thoroughly, and if the witness is false witness and he has accused his brother falsely, then you shall do to him just as he had intended to do to his brother. Thus you shall purge the evil from among you." Deuteronomy 19:18 through 19. The book of Proverbs has several maxims directed against false witnesses. And we'll take a look at some of them. A trustworthy witness will not lie, but a false witness utters lies. Proverbs 14:5. Do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause, and do not deceive with your lips. Proverbs 24:28. Like a club and a sword and a sharp arrow is a man who bears false witness against his neighbor. Proverbs 25:18. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who tells lies will not escape. Proverbs 19:5. And the last one is, a false witness will perish, but the man who listens to the truth will speak forever. Proverbs 21:28. And with this will bring us to the last commandment, number 10, your neighbor's stuff. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, and you shall not desire your neighbor's house, his field, or his male servant, or his female servant, his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Deuteronomy 5:21. Coveting means wanting what somebody else has. The Torah lists several examples of things that a person might covet: someone else's wife, a house, field, servants, livestock, or anything that belongs to another person. The other 9 commandments forbid specific behaviors, but the commandment against coveting forbids an inner attitude of the heart. Nevertheless, the other sins prohibited by the 10 commandments all begin in the heart as well. Yeshua said, "For out of the heart comes evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, theft, false witnesses, slanders. These are the things which defile the man." Matthew 15:19 through 20. Covetousness lies at the root of a great deal of unhappiness and human suffering. The trick to avoid coveting is to remember that God is a giver of all things. A man can receive nothing unless it has been given him from heaven. John 3:27. We can be confident that God gives us what is best for us. The same God who makes one man rich makes another man poor. The sages say that a really rich man is anyone who is content with what he has. Be content with what you have, for he himself has said, "I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you." And that's from Hebrews 13:5. Paul warns us that greed and covetousness are inappropriate for believers. He says greed must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. Ephesians 5:3. In another place, he says that greed amounts to idolatry, and that's in Colossians 3:5. In chapters 4 through 6 of his epistles to the Corinthians, Clement, the disciple of Peter, presents a long dissertation on the dangers of covetousness and envy. He says that it was through envy that death itself entered into the world. That's in 1 Clement 3:4. He points out that envy spawned the first murder. Envy and jealousy led to the murder of a brother. 1 Clement 4:7. He shows how covetousness and envy spawned the trouble between Jacob and Esau, between Joseph and his brothers, and between Moses and the Israelites. He attributes the ancient with Miriam's leprosy to envy and the trouble with Korah, Dathan, and Abiram to envy. He ascribes Saul's persecution of David to envy, From his own generation, he points to the same problem as the root of the persecution of the apostles and his fellow believers. He concludes his dissertation on envy and covetousness as follows. He says, "Envy has alienated wives from their husbands and changed that saying of our father Adam in Genesis 2:3. This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. Envy and strife have overthrown great cities and rotted up mighty nations." That's from 1 Clement 6:3-4. God is real. On that they had such a heart in them that they would fear me and keep all my commandments always, that it may be well with them and with their sons forever. Deuteronomy 5:29. As God spoke the Ten Commandments, the children of Israel were overwhelmed by the glory of God's voice speaking from the midst of the fire. "Why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of the Lord our God any longer, then we will die." And they said it in Deuteronomy 5:25. Rather than go through the experience of hearing God directly to them, again, they asked Moses to speak on God's behalf henceforth. At that moment in time, God was very real to every Israelite. He was not merely a theological idea or an abstract concept. He was a living being, dangerous and immediately at hand. It is like the difference between reading about lions in a book and finding yourself tossed into a cage with a real lion. Because we do not see God, we subconsciously relegate him to a sort of theoretical or fairy tale status. Occasionally, we might have amazing encounters with God that shatter that illusion. Once in a while, we might find ourselves standing face to face with a real lion. But we are forgetful creatures, and those rare encounters with God can quickly fade back into humdrum acknowledgement of God. Unfortunately, it is difficult for human beings to take a theoretical God seriously. When God is not real to us, we do not fear him and we stray into disobedience. When the Lord saw how his voice affected the Israelites, he said, "Oh, that they had such a heart in them, that they would fear me and keep all my commandments always." Deuteronomy 5:29. Hear, O Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Deuteronomy 6:4. Deuteronomy 6:4 has a special place in Judaism. It is the first Bible verse a child learns to say, and it is the last words a person recites before dying. It is the first verse in the series of scriptures that are recited every morning and evening and afternoon as part of the daily prayers. The series of scriptures is called the Shema because the first Hebrew word of Deuteronomy 6:4 is Shema, which means hear or listen. Deuteronomy 6:4-9 is the first of three passages of the Torah that constitute the daily recitation of Shema. And the three passages of the Shema are Deuteronomy 6:4-9, Deuteronomy 11:13-21, and Numbers 15:37-41. The rabbis of the Talmudic era referred to the daily recitation of the Shema as taking on the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. The imperative charge, "Hear, O Israel," could be understood as saying, "Obey, O Israel." When God tells us to hear something, he is calling for our obedience. For example, when I say to my child, "Listen to me," I'm about to issue some directive or instruction to them. When my children do not do something I told them to do, their first excuse is usually, "I didn't hear you." Here Moses tells Israel, "Listen to this, get ready to obey." And the Lord is one. The Lord is our God, the Lord is one, Deuteronomy 6:4. What does it mean to say that God is one? Sometimes Christians feel disconcerted by this verse because of the Trinity theology regards God as three. Christians apologists often explain that the Hebrew word for one, ECHAD, can refer to a composite unity. Therefore, the three persons of the Trinity constitute one God. Actually, Deuteronomy 6:4 is not a statement on the composition of God's mystical essence. Whether the word ECHAD can be regarded as composite unity or singular number, exclusive of any multiplicity, was not in the view of Moses. He was not weighing in on the argument about the nature of God. Importing those types of arguments into this text is anachronistic. Besides, the Jewish mystics speak of God expressing himself in 10 different emanations, and they see no difficulty in reconciling those 10 emanations with the truth of God's singularity in Deuteronomy 6:4. When the Torah says that God is one, it's simply declaring monotheism. There are no other gods contending for the title. The false gods and idols of the world are not even in the running. God is singular, unique, utterly in his own category, and preeminent above all things. He is number one. Love God. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Deuteronomy 6:5. Judaism regards Deuteronomy 6:4-9 as the most precious passage in the Torah. Once a teacher of the Torah came to Yeshua in the temple and asked him, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the Torah?" Matthew 22:36. Remember that question? Yeshua responded by quoting the Shema. He said, "The foremost is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength." That's in Mark 12:29-30. He taught that Deuteronomy 6:5, the second verse of the Shema, is the first and greatest commandment. We are to love God with all our heart, soul, and might. Loving God is the greatest commandment because love of God should be our motivation for keeping all the other commandments. Immediately after telling us to love God, the passage Deuteronomy goes on to speak of all the rest of the Torah commandments. This teaches that love for God must come first. It should be the impetus for our obedience to God. This is the difference between a human king and the Holy One. A human king is not concerned whether his subjects have affection for him so long as they obey him, fear him, and do their duty toward him. God does not want simple obedience. He desires a real relationship with his people. He wants us to love him. Why does God command us to love him? He does not need our love, but he wants our love because he loves us. He wants our love in the same way that a young man in love with a girl desires for her to return the affection that he feels. God's love for us is infinitely deeper than any human emotion. God's love for his people is not based on their merit. We are not deserving, actually, of his love. Moses told the Israelites, "The Lord did not set his love on you, nor chose you because you were more in a number than any of the peoples, for you were the fewest of all peoples." Deuteronomy 7:7. God's love for his people is a matter of covenant loyalty. He has set his affection upon us, and his affection does not waver. It says, "Know therefore that the Lord your God, he is God, the faithful God, who keeps his covenant and his loving kindness to 1,000 generations with those who love him and keep his commandments." Deuteronomy 7:9. The Torah goes on to explain that we express our love for God by placing his commandments on our hearts, speaking of them every day, teaching them to our children, writing them on our doorposts, and binding them onto our hands and our foreheads. We show our love for God by daily diving into his word and bringing his Torah to bear on every aspect of our lives. The Apostle John summarizes the Shema when he says, "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome." 1 John 5:3. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them doorposts of your house and on your gates. Deuteronomy 6:4-9. The righteousness of the Torah. It will be righteous for us if we are careful to observe all these commandments before the Lord your God, just as he commanded us. Deuteronomy 6:25. The Torah is a standard of God's righteousness. Disobedience to God is sin. Obedience to him is righteousness. Therefore, obedience to his commandment is a matter of righteousness. The Apostle Paul refers to this as the righteousness which is in the Torah. Philippians 3:6. In another passage, Paul says, "For Moses writes that the man who practices righteousness, which is based on Torah, shall live by that righteousness." Romans 10:5. Therefore, we should strive to live according to the righteous standards God gives his Torah. However, there is another source of righteousness that is not found in the Torah. Paul calls it a righteousness apart from the Torah, witnessed by the Torah and the prophets, Romans 3:21. This righteousness does not come from being Jewish and keeping the Torah, but it was prophesied in the Torah. The righteousness apart from the Torah is through faith in the Messiah, the righteousness which comes from God on the basis of faith. And that's in Philippians 3:9. Yeshua the Messiah lived a perfect life of complete righteousness according to the Torah. He loved the Father with all his heart, soul, and strength. He fulfilled all the commandments of God that applied to him. Therefore, he attained the righteousness of the Torah. Nevertheless, he died under the punishment of the Torah. For whose sins did he die, if not for his own? For ours. When we place faith in him for atonement, his perfect righteousness is shared with us. That's what the gospel is all about. The true believer does not rely on his own righteousness to find favor with God. He relies on the righteousness of the Messiah, which is given through faith in him. Yeshua lived out the righteousness of the Torah, and that achievement is credited to us as righteousness. And that's about it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If this message blessed you, please like the video and subscribe. It helps the message to reach more people who need encouragement and truth. And feel free to follow our Instagram linked in the comments for daily inspiration. May God bless you and keep you. May he shine his light on you and be gracious to you. May he turn towards you and grant you peace. Grace and shalom to you all.